Maple Ridge was the kind of neighborhood people dreamed about when they thought of the American dream. For over 10 years, it had been a sanctuary of peace, lined with well-kept oak trees and neighbors who actually knew each other's names. We didn't have high gates or fancy security. Instead, we had a community that functioned on mutual respect and a shared love for weekend potlucks and paint nights. My name is Liam, and alongside my wife, Olivia, we had built a life here that felt untouchable. There was never a need for a homeowners association, HOA, in Maple Ridge. We managed our own lawns, painted our shutters colors that made us happy, and if someone's fence needed a repair, a neighbor was usually there with a hammer before a complaint could even be uttered. But the atmosphere began to shift about 3 months ago when a new family moved into the large colonial-style house at the end of the street. Enter Brenda and Kevin. From the moment their moving truck touched the pavement, the energy changed. They didn't come over with cookies or a friendly wave. Instead, I noticed Brenda standing on the sidewalk with a heavy leather-bound clipboard and a look of pure disdain on her face. She wasn't looking at her new home. She was staring at everyone else's. "Is she measuring the length of the grass?" Olivia asked one morning, peering through our kitchen blinds. I looked out and saw Brenda literally crouching down near Mr. Henderson's lawn with a ruler. It was bizarre, but we shrugged it off as new neighbor jitters. We were wrong. Within weeks, the entitled attitude began to infect our peace. Brenda began approaching neighbors during their morning walks, not to say hello, but to issue verbal warnings. She told the Millers that their house paint was a shade of blue that clashed with the neighborhood's aesthetic energy. She informed Mrs. Higgins that she had too many flowers and not enough grass, which apparently violated some imaginary regulation Brenda had invented in her head. The real shock came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was checking the mail when I saw a formal-looking envelope tucked into our handle. It was heavy, professional, and bore a terrifying header: Maple Ridge Homeowners Association Official Violation Notice. My heart skipped a beat. HOA since when? I opened it to find a fine for $150. The reason? Unauthorized lawn ornaments. We had 2 small garden gnomes that Olivia's mother had given us. According to this document, they were a violation of HOA Bylaw Article 2, Section 4. I walked over to our neighbor, Sarah, who was standing by her mailbox looking pale. "Did you get one too?" I asked. She nodded, her hand trembling. "They fined me $300 because my trash cans were visible from the street for 10 minutes after the garbage truck left. Liam, the letter says if I don't pay, they'll add interest. They said it could go to a collection agency, that they could eventually take my car or my house." I was stunned. "Sarah, we don't have an HOA, we never have." "That's what I thought," she cried. "But Brenda showed me a rule book. She has documentation, registration numbers, and special credentials. She looked so official, Liam. I was too scared to argue, so I just paid it through the online portal they set up." I looked down the street and saw Brenda and Kevin standing on their porch, watching us like hawks watching mice. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were treating our street like their private kingdom and acting like the local mafia, collecting protection money in the form of fake fines. A cold realization washed over me. These people weren't just entitled, they were predators. They had moved into a peaceful community, spotted our kindness, and mistaken it for weakness. As I looked at the official notice in my hand, I knew one thing for certain. Brenda and Kevin had picked the wrong neighborhood to scam. The invasion had begun, but the war was far from over. The tension in Maple Ridge was no longer a silent hum. It had become a physical weight that settled over the neighborhood. While the morning sun usually brought the sound of lawnmowers and friendly chatter, today it brought the sound of Brenda's heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I watched from my porch as she moved from house to house, clutching her leather clipboard like a holy relic. She wasn't just observing anymore, she was hunting. I decided it was time to get some answers. I walked over to Mr. Henderson's yard, where Brenda was currently berating him for the excessive number of bird feeders hanging from his porch. "Excuse me, Brenda," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I received a notice in the mail yesterday, a fine for garden gnomes. I've lived here 10 years and we've never had an HOA. Can you explain exactly when this was established? Brenda didn't even look up from her clipboard. She adjusted her glasses and sighed, a sound of practiced exasperation. Liam, is it? Look, I understand change is hard for some people, but Maple Ridge has been unregulated for far too long. Property values are at stake here. Kevin and I have taken it upon ourselves to bring some much-needed order to this chaos. That doesn't answer my question, I countered. Who voted for this? Where are the bylaws? Where is the board of directors? She finally looked at me, her eyes cold and piercing. We are a legally constituted organization, Liam. We have the authority, the documentation, and the credentials to prove it. If you have a problem with the bylaws, you are welcome to file a formal appeal, after you pay the outstanding fines, of course. She then handed me a new slip of paper. My eyes widened as I read it. Another one? I asked, my voice rising. Violation of Article 5, subsection 3, she stated flatly. You've been parking in your own driveway. In this neighborhood, the driveways are considered shared pathways for pedestrian access. By parking there, you are blocking the community's right-of-way. This is my private property, Brenda, I said, gesturing to the concrete that I had personally pressure-washed for a decade. While I don't mind neighbors taking a shortcut across my yard occasionally, I am under no legal obligation to provide a public walkway through my driveway. I suggest you check the deeds with the land registry, Liam, she replied with a smug smirk. You'll find that I am quite right in everything I'm saying. Resistance will only lead to further penalties, including interest and potential legal action from our collection agency. As she marched off toward the next victim, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Kevin. Unlike Brenda, who was all fire and fury, Kevin was quiet, almost clinical. Look, Liam, Kevin said, his voice low. We just want what's best for the neighborhood. We have big plans, beautification projects, improved security, a better class of community. But that requires funding. If you keep making things difficult, we might have to start a file on you. We wouldn't want the community to vote you out, would we? The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. They weren't just trying to collect money, they were trying to seize control of our lives. I watched Kevin walk away, joining his wife as they continued their patrol. I looked around and saw my neighbors watching from behind their curtains, their faces filled with a mix of fear and confusion. Many of them were elderly, like Mrs. Higgins, or young families who couldn't afford a legal battle. They were being bullied into submission by a pair of newcomers who had manufactured authority out of thin air. As I walked back into my house, the anger I had been feeling crystallized into a cold, hard determination. Brenda was right about one thing. I did need to check the land registry, but not to confirm her lies. I needed to find the one thing that could stop a fake queen and her silent enforcer, the truth. I sat down at my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. If Brenda wanted to play by the rules, then I was going to find out exactly whose rules they were. Because in Maple Ridge, we didn't have an HOA, but we did have a community. And a community that stands together is something no fake notice can ever destroy. The weight of Brenda's threats lingered in the air long after she had finished her rounds. I knew that if I was going to stop this, I couldn't just yell at her on the sidewalk. I needed cold, hard facts. While Brenda and Kevin were busy patrolling the street and acting like the local mafia, I turned my home office into a temporary command center. My first step was the paperwork. I pulled out the official violation notice Brenda had stuck in my driveway. It looked professional, complete with a registration number and a list of bylaws. I started by searching for the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association in the state's official business registry. My heart pounded as I hit the enter key. Result: no records found. I tried every variation. Maple Ridge HOA, Maple Ridge Community Group, the Ridge Association, nothing. I then called the local municipality office. After being on hold for 15 minutes, a clerk confirmed what I already suspected. Our street was not and had never been part of an HOA. The registration number on Brenda's notice, It was a complete fabrication, likely pulled from a random template she found online. Armed with this knowledge, I realized the scale of the deception. Brenda and Kevin weren't just entitled, they were committing fraud. I heard that more neighbors were giving into the intimidation and paying the fines because they were terrified of losing their homes or cars. I knew I had to act fast before they collected thousands more from our community. I decided to test Kevin one more time to see if he would crack under pressure. I caught him in his front yard while Brenda was inside. "Kevin, I've been looking into this legally constituted organization of yours," I said, leaning against my fence. "I can't find your registration anywhere. How and when was this HOA formed?" Kevin stiffened. "What difference does it make to you?" he snapped, his facade of calm beginning to slip. "It matters because I live here," I replied firmly. "HOAs are supposed to be governed by a committee of homeowners. So far, it's just you and Brenda making up rules and taking people's money. Something doesn't seem right." Kevin narrowed his eyes. "You just want to bring problems to the neighborhood, Liam. Maybe we should see if the rest of the community even wants you here." He was trying to gaslight me, but it wasn't going to work. As I walked away, I noticed Brenda watching from the window, her phone held up as if she were recording me. She was trying to build a file on me for being a problematic resident. Later that evening, I started a group chat with a few trusted neighbors. The ones I knew were too smart to fall for Brenda's act, but too scared to speak up alone. I shared the screenshots of my research and the confirmation from the municipality. "It's fake," I wrote. "The HOA, the fines, the credentials, it's all a scam. They are taking our money and putting it directly into their own pockets." The responses came in fast. "I paid $500 for my fence color," Mr. Miller replied. "She took $200 from me for excessive birdseed," Mrs. Higgins added. We decided to meet secretly at the local park the following evening. We weren't just a collection of houses anymore. We were a resistance. We planned to gather our evidence and go to the police together, but first, we wanted to see just how far Brenda and Kevin would go. When I got home that night, I found yet another notice on my windshield. This one was for aggressive behavior toward an HOA official and carried a $500 fine. I laughed. They had no idea that their reign was about to come to a very loud and very legal end. The atmosphere in Maple Ridge was thick with the scent of mown grass and unspoken rebellion. Following our group chat, the secret meeting at the local park was set for sunset. I made sure to take a circuitous route, avoiding the gaze of Brenda's house, which now felt like a watchtower overlooking our once peaceful street. As I arrived at the park, I saw a dozen neighbors huddled near the old oak tree. Mr. Miller was there, looking flustered, alongside Sarah and even elderly Mrs. Higgins. The fear in their eyes was being replaced by a simmering anger. I stood in the center of the circle, my laptop open to the municipality's database. "It's confirmed," I told them, my voice a low, steady anchor. "I've checked every registry. There is no Maple Ridge HOA. It doesn't exist. Brenda and Kevin are running a scam, using fake bylaws and imaginary regulations to extort money from all of us." "But they had a rule book," Sarah whispered, still clutching a $300 violation notice she'd received for her trash cans. "Anyone with a printer and a sense of entitlement can make a rule book, Sarah," I replied. "They've been preying on our desire to be good neighbors. They know that in a community like ours, people are generally too polite or too scared to question authority, even if that authority is self-appointed." Just as I was showing Mr. Miller the lack of registration for the HOA's supposed bank account, a sharp, familiar voice cut through the evening air. "I thought I might find a group of violators congregating here." We all turned. Standing on the edge of the park was Brenda, her leather clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Kevin stood a few paces behind her, arms crossed, his face a mask of cold indifference. "This is an unauthorized gathering," Brenda declared, stepping into the circle. Section 9, Paragraph B of the Community Guidelines prohibits unsanctioned meetings that could lead to neighborhood unrest. I'll be nodding everyone's name for the official file. The neighbors instinctively shrank back, but I stepped forward. The only unrest here, Brenda, is being caused by you. We were just discussing the fact that we can't find any record of your association with the state or the city. Brenda didn't flinch. She gave a short, high-pitched laugh. Of course you can't, Liam. We are a private, legally constituted organization. Our filings are confidential to protect the privacy of the board members, which currently are Kevin and myself. That's not how HOAs work, I countered. HOAs are governed by the homeowners themselves. Where was the vote? Where are the minutes from the meetings? We have big plans for this place, Brenda snapped, ignoring my questions. We are the owners of this vision, and if you don't like the direction we're taking, perhaps you should consider moving to a neighborhood that doesn't care about its property values. Kevin stepped up beside her. We suggest you all go home. Continuing this rebellion will only result in steeper fines and potential litigation. We already have enough evidence to start proceedings against several of you for nuisance violations. For a moment, silence hung over the park. I could see the resolve of my neighbors wavering. Brenda's confidence was a powerful tool. She was counting on our uncertainty. We aren't going anywhere, I said, looking at my neighbors and then back at Brenda. And we aren't paying another dime. In fact, we want a full refund of every fine you've extorted from this community. Brenda and Kevin exchanged a look, and then they did something truly chilling. They laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was the laugh of people who genuinely believed they were untouchable. Good luck with that, Liam, Brenda said, turning on her heel. Expect your next notice by morning. It's going to be a very expensive one. As they walked away, the neighbors turned to me. The fear was back, but so was the realization that there was no turning back now. We had declared war on the Shadow Queen of Maple Ridge. What now? Mr. Miller asked, his voice trembling slightly. Now, I said, closing my laptop, we stop playing by their rules and start playing by the law. Tomorrow we go to the police. The morning after the park confrontation, the air in Maple Ridge felt electric. True to her word, Brenda had taped a final demand notice to my front door before sunrise. It was a staggering $2,500 fine for inciting neighborhood insurrection and defamation of HOA leadership. But instead of feeling intimidated, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I took a photo of the notice, peeled it off, and headed straight to the local police precinct. I wasn't alone. One by one, cars from our street pulled into the station parking lot. Mr. Miller, Sarah, and even Mrs. Higgins arrived, clutching their folders of violation notices and receipts for fines they had already paid. We met with Detective Vance, a no-nonsense officer who looked at Brenda's official HOA documentation with a raised eyebrow. I've lived in this county for 20 years, Detective Vance said, flipping through the fake rulebook Liam had provided. I've never heard of a private association having the authority to threaten your home or car without a court-ordered lien. And this registration number, it's the zip code for a town in Kansas followed by some random digits. Liam explained the situation, how Brenda and Kevin had moved in and immediately started acting like the local mafia. He showed the detective the research from the municipality and the land registry, proving that no such HOA was ever legally formed or registered. They've been collecting thousands of dollars, Liam pointed out. We want to know where that money went, because it certainly didn't go into our streetlights or the park maintenance. Detective Vance leaned back. If they are collecting money under the guise of a legal entity that doesn't exist, that's not just a neighborhood dispute. That's fraud and theft by deception. He promised to open an official investigation and told us to stop paying immediately. When I returned home, I saw Kevin standing in his driveway watching me. He looked less confident than the day before. I walked right up to the edge of his property. I spoke to the authorities, Kevin, I said, my voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. The municipality has no record of you. The police are looking into your collection practices. I suggest you start looking for a very good lawyer." Kevin's face turned a pale shade of gray. "You're making a mistake, Liam. We have big plans for this neighborhood." "Your plans are over," I replied. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire that the HOA was a sham. Neighbors who had been living in isolation and fear for months began stepping out onto their porches. We shared the news that we were fighting back as a community. The most satisfying moment came that evening. Brenda marched out of her house, clipboard in hand, heading toward Mrs. Higgins' yard to complain about her bird feeders again. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, Mr. Miller stepped out. Then Sarah. Then the Millers. We all stood on our lawns, arms crossed, silently watching her. Brenda stopped in her tracks. She looked at the wall of defiant faces. Her lip curled in a sneer, but for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. She realized she no longer held the power of intimidation. Her fake kingdom was crumbling. "Get off my property, Brenda," Mrs. Higgins said firmly, her voice not shaking for the first time in weeks. "And take your fake notices with you." Brenda turned and retreated into her house, slamming the door. But we weren't done yet. The police were already digging into their bank accounts, and what they were about to find would ensure that Brenda and Kevin's rule ended in a courtroom, not a boardroom. Following the police intervention, the atmosphere in Maple Ridge shifted from fear to a strange, celebratory defiance. Detective Vance had made it clear. Since there was no legally registered HOA, their bylaws were nothing more than ink on paper. Liam realized that while the police handled the fraud investigation, the neighborhood had a golden opportunity to show Brenda and Kevin exactly what no HOA really meant. "If she wants to play the rules queen, let's give her a world where she has zero rules to enforce," Liam told the group chat. The next morning, the malicious compliance began. Since Brenda had spent months complaining about aesthetic energy and standard decor, the neighbors decided to embrace everything she hated. It started with Liam. He went into his garage and pulled out every unauthorized item he owned. He didn't just put the two small gnomes back. He went to the local garden center and bought a giant, 6-foot-tall inflatable neon pink flamingo. He set it up right in the center of his lawn, right where Brenda could see it from her kitchen window. Next to it, he placed a sign that read, "Official guard bird of the non-existent HOA." But Liam was just the beginning. Mr. Miller, who had been fined for his 2 blue shutters, decided to go even bolder. He bought several cans of neon orange paint and began painting his mailbox in a loud, zigzag pattern. Sarah, who had been hounded for her trash cans, moved them from the side of her house to the very edge of the sidewalk, decorating them with glitter and googly eyes. By noon, the street looked less like a quiet suburb and more like a chaotic art festival. Brenda eventually emerged from her house, her face turning a deep shade of crimson that almost matched the pink flamingo. She marched over to Liam's property line, her clipboard trembling in her hand. "Liam, this is a grotesque violation of Article 8. You are creating a visual nuisance that is tanking our property values," she screamed. Liam just leaned against his porch railing, sipping a cup of coffee. "I'd love to help you, Brenda, but as we discussed, I've checked the deeds with the land registry. It turns out this is my private property, and since there is no registered HOA, I can put a literal circus in my yard if I feel like it." "I will fine you $1,000 for that flamingo," she shrieked, scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. "Go ahead," Liam laughed. "But make sure you save that paper. The police are going to need it for their theft by deception file." Seeing she wasn't getting anywhere with Liam, Brenda turned her sights on the rest of the neighborhood. She tried to storm toward Mr. Henderson's yard, but she was met with a wall of sound. Several neighbors had synchronized their speakers to play the chicken dance on a continuous loop at the maximum legal volume. Every time Brenda tried to open her mouth to issue a violation, she was drowned out by the upbeat, ridiculous music. Kevin tried to intervene, coming out to the sidewalk to look intimidating, but the spell was broken. Neighbors who used to hide behind their curtains were now out on their lawns, cheering each other on. They weren't just being petty, they were reclaiming their happiness. The breaking point for Brenda came when she saw Mrs. Higgins. The sweet elderly woman had replaced her forbidden bird feeders with an entire row of them, and she was currently wearing a t-shirt that said, "I feed birds, not scammers." Brenda lost it. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, throwing her clipboard onto the pavement. She tried to grab Sarah's trash cans to move them back, but Sarah stepped in her way. "Don't touch my property, Brenda," Sarah said calmly, "unless you want to add trespassing to your police report." Brenda retreated to her porch, defeated by the very community she tried to control. She had lived for months with the power of isolation, making everyone feel uncomfortable at their own homes. But now, the isolation was hers. As the sun began to set over the neon flamingos and orange mailboxes, Liam looked around at his friends. They had been strong before Brenda and Kevin arrived, and they were proving that the queen of the cul-de-sac had no crown when the people refused to bow. The neighborhood's celebration of neon flamingos and chicken dance music was interrupted by the low, synchronized hum of several heavy vehicles. We all stopped what we were doing as 3 police cruisers and a plain black SUV pulled onto our street. Detective Vance stepped out, holding a thick stack of folders. This wasn't just a routine patrol, it was a reckoning. Liam stood by his giant pink flamingo as Brenda and Kevin emerged from their house, looking triumphant for a brief, delusional second. Brenda actually smoothed her hair and grabbed her clipboard, likely thinking the police had finally arrived to arrest Liam for his visual nuisances. "Officer, thank God you're here," Brenda shouted, pointing her finger at Liam's yard. "I want these people cited for trespassing, noise violations, and the immediate removal of these plastic monstrosities." Detective Vance didn't even look at the flamingo. He walked straight up to Brenda and Kevin's porch. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Vance. We've completed our preliminary investigation into the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." Brenda's smile faltered. "Excellent, then you've seen our bylaws." "Actually," Vance said, his voice dropping into a cold, professional tone, "we've seen your bank accounts. We've also spoken with the state attorney's office and the Federal Communications Commission regarding your official notices." The neighborhood went silent. Kevin tried to step back into the house, but another officer blocked the door. "We executed a search warrant on your digital records this morning," Vance continued, loud enough for all of us to hear. "It turns out that every single fine paid by these residents was deposited directly into a personal account held by you and your husband. There is no HOA registration, no tax ID, and zero evidence that any of this money was used for community improvements." "It was for the vision," Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking. "We were building a better community. The money was for future projects." "The law calls it fraud and theft by deception," Vance replied. "And because you used the mail to send these fake notices and a digital portal to collect the funds, you're looking at additional charges for mail and wire fraud." The detectives began leading Brenda and Kevin down their front steps in handcuffs. It was a staggering sight. The queen of the cul-de-sac, who had spent months threatening us with legal ruin, was now being ushered into the back of a police cruiser in front of the very people she had tried to exploit. But the biggest reveal was yet to come. Detective Vance walked over to Liam. "You were right to look into those registration numbers. Not only were they fake, but we found that Brenda and Kevin have done this before in 2 other states. They move into unhoed neighborhoods, manufacture an association, collect as much fine money as they can in a year, and then disappear before anyone gets wise." Liam felt a chill. They were professional predators. As the police began searching the house, they found piles of stolen property. It turned out that if Brenda couldn't get people to pay a fine, she would simply take things. They found Spectrum internet cables that had been illegally cut and stolen from residents' homes, including expensive wiring that Brenda claimed was an eyesore. She had been literally sabotaging people's utilities to force them to comply with her aesthetic standards. "They destroyed our property and then charged us for the privilege," Sarah said, looking at the recovered wires in disbelief. As the sun began to set, the police cruisers pulled away, carrying the HOA leadership to the county jail. The street was quiet, but it wasn't the fearful silence of the past few months. It was the silence of a long-overdue peace. Liam looked at his neighbors. They had been humiliated, scammed, and isolated, but they had stood their ground. "They might be gone," Liam said to the group, "but we have a lot of work to do to make this neighborhood whole again." The aftermath of Brenda and Kevin's arrest felt like the first deep breath a drowning man takes after reaching the surface. The Maple Ridge Mafia, as they were now dubbed by the local news, were held on high bail. The investigation revealed that they had successfully extorted nearly $45,000 from our small neighborhood over just 4 months. They had been using the money to fund a lavish lifestyle and down payments on luxury cars, all while we were stressed about the color of our shutters and the height of our grass. But the real victory wasn't just seeing them in orange jumpsuits. It was seeing our neighborhood come back to life. A week after the arrest, the great cleanup began. Liam, Mr. Miller, and Sarah organized a community weekend. The first order of business, removing the fake HOA parking-only signs Brenda had bolted to the streetlights. We didn't just take them down, we threw them into a communal scrap heap and turned it into a celebratory bonfire later that night. The court case moved swiftly. Because Brenda and Kevin were repeat offenders with a history of HOA hijacking in other states, the judge had no mercy. They were ordered to pay full restitution to every resident of Maple Ridge. While it would take time for the money to be recovered from their seized assets, the legal victory was enough for us. To mark the official end of the Dark Ages, Liam decided to throw the biggest block party Maple Ridge had ever seen. "No clipboards allowed," the digital invitation read. On the day of the party, the street was a vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful mess. There was no standardized aesthetic. Mr. Miller's neon orange mailbox stayed as a trophy of rebellion. Liam kept the giant pink flamingo on his lawn, now wearing a tiny crown and a sign that said, "President of Nothing." Mrs. Higgins brought 3 extra bird feeders and placed them right on the edge of her property line, laughing as the birds chirped loudly. We set up long tables right in the middle of the street, the very street Brenda said we weren't allowed to block. We had a massive barbecue, and the smell of grilled burgers and corn on the cob filled the air. For the first time in months, people weren't whispering or looking over their shoulders. Kids were drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, and music, loud, joyful music, echoed through the trees. As the sun began to set, Liam stood up on a chair to address the crowd. 10 years ago, we moved here because we wanted a community," he said, raising a plastic cup. "A few months ago, someone tried to take that from us by using fear, fake rules, and entitlement. They tried to tell us that our homes weren't ours and that our neighbors were our enemies. But look around. They didn't break us. They actually made us stronger. We aren't a regulated association. We're a neighborhood, and that is worth more than any property value Brenda could ever imagine." The cheer that went up was deafening. As for the big colonial house at the end of the street, it went back on the market. But this time the neighborhood was ready. When the new family eventually moved in, they weren't met with a clipboard or a fine. They were met by Liam and Olivia with a warm apple pie and a simple message. "Welcome to Maple Ridge. We don't have an HOA here. We just have neighbors. Paint your house whatever color makes you happy." Peace had finally returned to the cul-de-sac. The Queen was gone, the HOA was dead, and for the first time in a long time, Maple Ridge felt like home again. Wow, what a journey! From fake fines to a total neighborhood rebellion. If you enjoyed watching Liam and his neighbors take down the ultimate, Karen, and her scamming husband, make sure to smash that like button. Have you ever dealt with a crazy HOA or a neighbor who thought they owned the whole street? Tell us your wildest stories in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications. We have more stories of justice, malicious compliance, and entitled Karens coming your way every single week. Thanks for watching, and remember, your house, your rules. See you in the next one.